So welcome everyone to the District 5360 Grants Workshop. This is part of the process that clubs need to follow in order to get qualified to receive district grants and DDF for global grants in the course of the 2022-2023 Rotary year. For those who don't know me, I'm Craig Henderson. I'm currently the chair of the District Grants Subcommittee, and I'll be walking you through some of the slides that we have today. The slide deck that we have is actually packed full of information, and I would encourage people to refer to it when they need to find information in a hurry as you're applying for grants and preparing the things that you need to do to get ready for that. The deck will not be circulated generally by email, but will be posted on the District Grants website. And you'll be hearing a lot about that website over the course of the next few hours. So let's get started. I'd like, first of all, to begin with a land acknowledgement. Just acknowledging here that we are meeting today on the traditional territories of the peoples of Treaty 7 in Southern Alberta. These people include the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Tsuut'ina Nation, the Stoney Nakoda First Nation, and as well, Southern Alberta is the home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Regional Zone number 3. So just a quick look at the agenda here. As I kick off, I'm going to turn the mic over to our District Governor, Martin Parnell, to offer a few words of welcome. Then when we get into the seminar itself, we basically got it in 3 sections today with 2 breaks. So the first section will be the overview material that we go through. This is about how the clubs have to get qualified to receive district grants. Then in the second part of it, we'll actually be looking at the various district project grants of various types. Lynn Exton will be one of the speakers in that section. And then following another break, we'll actually get into the application for DDF for global grants, and then a few wind-up topics, including the importance of reporting and a little bit of a walkthrough of the District Grants website itself. So I'll just turn the microphone over to our District Governor and welcome Martin Parnell.
Great, thank you, Craig. And it's terrific to be here and seeing everyone here this morning. Through the generosity of its donors, District 5360 can award $443,113 US, or in real money, $548,131 Canadian dollars in district designated funds in the 2022 Rotary year to the clubs in our district. Very significant amount. I'm also very excited to announce that our district has received 2 awards for foundation giving from the zone. The first is the highest total annual fund donations in Rotary Zone 28 for 2020-2021. And the second is the highest annual fund donations per capita in Rotary Zone 28 for 2020-2021. And just to kind of explain the significance of that, in our zone, in Zone 28, there are 21 districts. So I think, quite frankly, give everyone a pat on the back, because that is an amazing achievement. Now I'd like to share with you the 4 takeaway messages for the day. And these are: pay attention to details is essential. The MOU, the Message of Understanding, Memorandum of Understanding, must be executed, and district grants applications must be received by May the 1st. Monies cannot be committed before grant applications are approved. Clubs must satisfy all reporting requirements. No new payments can be made while reports from past grants are outstanding. And if the rules are not followed, grant funds must be returned to RI, with the district collecting the funds on RI's behalf. So 4 absolute key things to keep in mind as we go through this presentation and afterwards. Great, thank you, Craig.
Okay, so now we're just going to launch straight into it here, and I'm going to take the first section of the presentation here where I'll be walking through an overview of the Grants Committee. And then we'll follow up on that with two pieces that deal with Peace Fellowships and also with the Global Grant Scholarships. So launching in here to the overview of what the clubs need to do to be qualified, it always makes sense to keep in mind the Rotary year that we're talking about. So we're currently in the 2021-2022 planning year for projects that will actually get underway in the Rotary 2022-2023 year. So the application deadlines for May are ultimately for funds that are received in the 2022 Rotary year, and those funds are typically released from RI to us usually mid-late summer, so the late August to early September timeframe. So that's the Rotary year that we're talking about here, and it's always helpful to keep that in mind as we're working through some of these projects. So I wanted to do a very brief overview of the Grants Committee itself, just to sort of set the context. So within our district, we have a District Rotary Foundation Chair, who's Jamie Moorhouse, and the District Grants Subcommittee rolls up under the District Rotary Foundation Chair. There is another committee, the Grants Stewardship, which actually does provide an audit function to the way that we run our grants here in the district. So oftentimes when we say that the reporting is a key consideration, these things are in fact reviewed and gone over very carefully. So it's important to ensure that we are fulfilling all of our obligations to Rotary to avoid the scenario in which funds ultimately end up needing to be returned. So under the Rotary District Foundation Chair, there's the District Grants Subcommittee. I'm currently the chair of that committee, and that committee has a number of teams under it, and each of these teams are responsible for evaluating the grants of various types. So Lynn will be talking in the second section about the various district projects, which are now becoming known as the district community grants projects. So there's a team that evaluates a whole series of projects of that type. That chair is currently vacant. So for the upcoming Rotary year, it will be Jamie and myself who actually stand as the primary contact point for clubs that are working on those kinds of grants. But the team itself actually goes through and evaluates the various project proposals that are brought forward. The other thing that I'd like to just point out here is that we have a reports monitoring function that's been headed up for a number of years by Gail Williams. I just wanted to acknowledge that Gail will be departing that role in December, and will be there'll be a new reports monitoring group that will be taking care of the reports going forward. So for me, for sure, a huge thank you to Gail for all the work that she's done over the years to ensure that the reporting is kept up to snuff within our district. A little bit here just on the overall process of applying for district grants. So you'll start by filling out a grant application. This is, of course, assuming that you've already completed your Memorandum of Understanding and that you as a club are qualified to receive district grant monies, and there'll be a little more on that later. But ultimately, the process is for qualified clubs to complete an application. This application then is received by the District Grants Subcommittee and the various teams under it, which look at the grants of various types. So we've got the district project, now becoming the community development project team, travel grants, global grants, scholarships, Peace Fellows, all those different kinds of projects and grants that can be applied for through this committee will have a team underneath that actually looks at and evaluates the various applications. For the district projects, these are all combined by the district grants committee into a single application to Rotary International for a block grant, and the district grants committee does submit that early in the summer, late spring. The block grant is received, or the application is received by the Rotary Foundation. The Rotary Foundation will review all of the projects that are in the block grant, and more they're coming back with requests for clarifications, supplemental information. So we work through all of that basically in the context of all the projects, and then the block grant as a whole is ultimately approved, and we receive notification of that typically late in the summer. And then when we receive that, ultimately the clubs can be notified that their grant applications have been successful. They can begin committing monies, and then a few weeks after that, the money is actually available to be paid out. The application for the global grants are a little bit different, but ultimately they go to the Rotary Foundation, and ultimately the clubs will receive notification on the status of their global grants. Now, some of the key documents that you'll find, and here's my first plug for the District Grants Committee website, which is rotary5360.org. It's a separate website from the district's general website, rotary5360.ca. But this website has everything that you require to complete your applications for the various global grants. Some of the key documents on it, which are well worth reviewing, include the grant's terms and conditions document, as well as the application forms for each of the various kinds of grants. A few updates, things that are new from TRF, the Rotary Foundation, this year. One significant one is that Rotaract clubs are now eligible to apply for grants. As of this moment, there are still some specific terms and conditions that we're waiting to see. So some of these have not yet been finalized. But in general terms, Rotaract clubs can now be included in our district block grant application, meaning that Rotaract clubs can this year apply for the various kinds of district project grants. Qualification rules and requirements for them are somewhat similar to the ones that apply to the Rotary clubs in general. There is still a stipulation that Rotaract clubs, must have participated with a Rotary club in a global grant before being able to apply directly for one themselves. So they have to have been a participant in a global grant before they can ultimately take the lead on a global grant. The second significant piece of news from the Rotary Foundation is that Rotary now has a seventh area of focus, which is the environment. We're starting to see a little bit of information now around what those kinds of projects can look like. And they typically will include such things as sustainability and livelihoods, projects to do climate mitigation, projects around nature and biodiversity, conservation, and environmental justice as well. So without going through in detail the next couple of slides, this is again reference material that you can go back to if you would like to look at putting together a global grant in that seventh area of focus. You can see that generally we're dealing with things that look like the restoration of land, sustainable types of development, addressing immediate impacts of climate change, sustainable agriculture, and so forth. The things that do not appear to qualify as an environmental grant would include things like usual community beautification, food distribution programs, nature therapy, outdoor recreation, and such. But I'll leave you to look through the list in a little bit more detail if you're interested in that kind of grant. But the things that we've seen so far from TRF are proposals for projects in the areas of agroecology and local food distribution, natural climate mitigation types of activities, various kinds of learning activities and local training. So I would suggest that as well, this kind of global project with focus on the environment could be good meaty terrain for doing something like a vocational training team. And I'll have more on what the vocational training teams look like a little bit later. But things like wildlife conservation, waste reduction, and renewables are all the kinds of things that seem to line up under that 7th area of focus for the environment. Want to talk a little bit about some of the key dates for the 2022-2023 grants, and I do admit that I'm going through this very quickly. But the first is today, attending this seminar is actually the first step on the road towards becoming qualified to receiving grants in the 2022-2023 Rotary year. So all the clubs who are here today earn a checkbox against attending the Grants Qualification Workshop. Other key dates in the calendar include April the 1st, which is the first day that clubs can begin applying for DDF. And that's another acronym we have here, District Designated Funds. We'll be talking to that a little bit later as well. But being able to receive district designated funds towards global grants, the opening date for that is April the 1st. For the district grants, May 1st is the cutoff date. So April 1st is a first date for DDF. May the 1st is a last date for filing your club MOU and applying for the various district grant applications, which close off on that date. As I showed in the earlier slide, typically we expect to hear back from TRF that our district block grant has been approved sometime in mid to late August. It was a little bit later this past year, owing to updates in the Rotary Foundation's processing software. So that actually came this year in late August. Some years it is mid-August. And the funds that we received for the district block grant, we received in mid-September of this year. Our anticipated allocations going into the 2022-2023 year, as Martin mentioned in his opening comment, looks something like $440,000 US. Which is the total pool for both district projects and for applying district designated funds to global grants. Within the district here, we typically have a policy where we split that pool in half so that 50% of that total is available for district grants. We're not carrying anything over from past years. Rotary does allow us to have a small admin and a small contingency fee. And at this point, we're not anticipating a lot of travel. So basically 50% of that total is more or less going 100% to district projects of the various kinds, the VTT, the community development projects, youth programs, and district scholarships. And from the other side of the coin, roughly the same amount of money is available for district designated uplifts onto global grant projects and global vocational training teams as well. So some of our key rules that come into play with really all types of projects. Our projects do require the active participation of Rotarians. So a district project cannot look like an unrestricted cash donation to some other organization. These funds are for doing projects, and the projects do require the active participation of Rotary clubs. A key one here is that monies cannot be committed before the grant is formally approved. So when we receive word from the Rotary Foundation that our block grant has been approved, we send out a notification to the various clubs that you can begin making the commitments under your projects, although the actual payment of funds often lags a little bit behind that. So as soon as you get the word from the district, you can begin making the commitments that you've made under the scope of the project. A few other things is that the Rotary Foundation funding cannot be used for administrative or indirect expenses of any other organization. Those are just a few of them. We would encourage you always to refer to the full Rotary terms and conditions, and you'll be able to get that document again off the district grants website, rotary5360.org. So we strongly encourage everybody to make themselves familiar with the Rotary terms and conditions. Just a bullet point here at the end. So there's a standard set of terms and conditions on rotary.org. And then there are a set of district Rotary terms and conditions on the district grants website. So in qualifying for district grants, as I kind of alluded to already, we've got the two big buckets. There's the DDF, the district designated funds, which are the uplift that go on to a global grant. And we also have the district funds that are available for our district community development work, our district scholarships, and so forth. Attending today's session is really the first step towards becoming qualified. Another key one is that you execute the Memorandum of Understanding with the district. The district as well has a Memorandum of Understanding that we execute with the Rotary Foundation. So in fact, we become eligible as a district by binding ourselves with a district MOU to Rotary International, and then the various clubs execute their own memoranda of understanding with the district, and that way the chain of governance is maintained all the way from the club right through and up to the Rotary Foundation. This ensures proper governance for grants and covers both kinds, the district grants and the district designated contributions to global grants. This year, clubs, including Rotaract, will sign the Memorandum of Understanding as part of the qualification process. Clubs, this is another key one, must report accurately on the use of both the district funds and the district designated funds. And the district and the clubs and the projects can certainly be audited by the Rotary Foundation. So in summary here, the qualification for district grants requires, first of all, the attendance, one person from each club at this session, a per capita donation or contribution of $50 US to the Rotary Foundation. And this is really a requirement for participating in our global grants, our district grants programs, and also receiving district designated funds for a global grant. If you are applying for a global grant directly without the district component, that requirement is not necessary. Club board agrees with the execution of a Memorandum of Understanding, and the club's president-elect, so the president for the upcoming year, and the nominee, president-elect nominee for the year following, must both sign the Memorandum of Understanding. And then when the MOU is executed and the board has approved it, that MOU is uploaded to the district grants website. I want to just drill in a little bit more on the Memorandum of Understanding. And basically, by executing the Memorandum of Understanding, your club is binding itself and agreeing to having a written financial plan that covers off the consistent stewardship of grant funds. Now, this is not a per project financial plan. This is a per club financial plan. And the records have to be maintained in a secure location and have to be transmitted basically from year to year from one Rotary board to the next, so that every Rotary board understands the terms that you previously agreed to. When audited, clubs must be able to confirm who is the keeper of the original records, how this information is maintained, and the retention period is 5 years for each project, and how the incoming boards of your club each year receive the information and become aware of the requirements of your Memorandum of Understanding. Failure to do so can result in your club being required to return all of district grant funds. It also puts the entire district, so all the other clubs in the district are at risk if the district loses its qualification to receive funds as a result of one or more clubs failing to meet all the commitments of their grants. So the reporting is exceptionally important to ensuring that we remain in compliance with the Rotary Foundation's terms and conditions, and that our district remains fully qualified at all times. So the first thing that you will do, and again, I will invite you to visit the website, would be to go to rotary5360.org, find the template form for the Memorandum of Understanding, download that, have your board approve it, have your incoming president-elect and your president-elect nominee execute that document, and then upload the document to the 5360 Grants website. Doing all that is the next step towards becoming qualified for receipt of district grants in 22-23. So that's it for me for this section. This might be a good opportunity to pause to see if there are any questions around the qualification and the MOU. So I'll invite people to use the chat if they have any questions, and otherwise we'll proceed on to the next section, which will be the Rotary Peace Fellowship. So just taking a quick peek here. We can move on. If you'd like to continue typing questions, here is one that just came up. Do we need to wait until April 1st to submit the Memorandum of Understanding? No, you don't. So the MOU is actually, the updated for 22-23 is available on the website now. So you could download the form immediately. But because you're going to require your president-elect nominee for the following Rotary year 23-24 to sign it, a lot of clubs will not know who that is at this point. So you'll probably have to wait until you have a president-elect nominee. But at that point, you should be able to sign the MOU at your convenience. May the 1st is the deadline for receiving it. And typically we see the Memoranda of Understanding start to trickle in and around January and February, with a bunch of them coming towards the end of the deadline. But you can certainly submit that form to us as soon as you know who your president-elect and your nominee are. There's a comment here. If you don't have a written financial plan and don't know how to do it, ask for help. And I completely agree with that. I'm actually in the process of putting together a template for the written financial plan, and that will be on the website as soon as we've had a chance to finalize that. Can updates be made to the MOU? Typically, the answer is yes, things happen. The main change to the MOU that we see is the president-elect or the president-elect nominee ultimately cannot fulfill their duties and are replaced. So we do have the provision for resubmission of the MOU if either of those club officers ultimately get replaced by other people after you originally signed the MOU. So we do want a current MOU with the correct president-elect and the correct nominee. And if you need to change those, that can certainly be accommodated. Okay, well, we can keep the chat open if there are any other questions about this. We'll probably have a few minutes at the first break that I can circle back and refer to any questions that come up during the next little while. But after that, or coming up next, I can turn our attention to the Rotary Peace Fellowship, and I'll invite Marie to cover off that section for us. So Marie, if you're unmuted and ready to go, by all means.
I am.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Marie Ricard, and I'm the subcommittee chair for the Rotary Peace Fellowships. And firstly, you may be wondering what the Peace Fellowship is all about. And just a little background on it, the Rotary Peace Fellowship was created when Rotary recognized the need for peace and development leadership. The fellowship's ultimate goal is to create lasting peace and lasting positive social change. There are 2 programs of study under the fellowship. Firstly, a fully funded master's degree academic fellowship, approximately 15 to 24 months, at one of the following Rotary Peace Centers. And they are Duke University, University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill in the US, International Christian University, and that is in Japan, University of Bradford, which is in the UK, University of Queensland in Australia, and Uppsala University in Sweden. There are approximately 50 Peace Fellowships in the world per year awarded for the master's degree program. Alternatively, there is a fully funded professional development certificate program, approximately 1 year of study, offering online learning, in-person classes, and an independent project development. There are approximately 80 awarded yearly for this, and the Peace Centers for these certificate programs are Chulalongkorn University in Thailand and Makere University in Uganda, which is really for people who are doing projects in Africa or are in Africa. Who's the ideal candidate? And every Rotarian can help us with this area because we need to find candidates, and sometimes they're hard to find. Typically, successful candidates have a strong academic background. They already have a bachelor's degree in a peace-related field. They are proficient in English, but usually speak more than one language. They have a strong commitment to international peace and understanding, as demonstrated through their professional and academic achievements and their personal and community service. They have potential leadership skills, and they would typically have 5 to 7 years of work experience in a peace-related area of focus. And this could be in healthcare, education, not-for-profit social work, policing, government, many different areas would encompass that peace-related area of focus. These peace fellowships are not only open to, they are not open to Rotarians. spouses, and their descendants or ancestors or employees of Rotary. The best way to check if you are eligible is to go online at rotary.org and take the eligibility quiz. Therefore, how do you apply for a fellowship? If you have somebody that's interested, you tell them to go online at www.rotary.org and Google Peace Fellowships. The deadline is May 15th, 2022, this year for study in 2023 and 2024. Applications are available in February of 2022. Our district committee vets the application, interviews the applicants, and nominates one or more of the applicants to RI by July 1 of 2022. And that's done by an endorsement submitted online. And this is after the application, after the interview process. Rotarian mentorship is beneficial, and it's really key for that person to get to know about Rotary, to invite them out to a meeting, to introduce them to some Rotarians. And some of the great work that we do is important for them to have a background. There's no cost to the club or district. There is some information on our district website in the next slide with my contact information. And that district website is, of course, rotary5360.ca, and it's under the grants section that you would find that. Here are a couple of people from our district that were successful in receiving the Peace Fellowship and our Peace Fellows. And the first one is Lorelei Higgins, who went to Chiloncorn in 2019. And the second one who did the same program is Megan Farquharson in 2017. I have been talking to Lorelei Higgins recently, and she currently is the community lead for the City of Calgary's anti-racism program. And she's working to advance the city's commitment to truth and reconciliation. So an important job right now, very topical. Here are our committee members. I'm the chair, and you can contact me at any time for more information. Also, Sylvia Kennedy from Red Deer East Club, Elisa Pavilion from Calgary Heritage Park, Sheila Tominski from Calgary Heritage Park, Jim McSween from Sylvan Lake Club, and Christine Rendell from Calgary East. But we would love to have new committee members join us, especially from Lethbridge or Medicine Hat or Saskatchewan Rotarians. Please contact me if you are interested in participating. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Marie. Great overview of the Peace Fellowship program. I'd now like to call on Hendrik Cray as well to talk a little bit about the Global Scholarship Grants.
Yes, thank you, Craig, and good morning, everybody. And can we advance the slides a couple, I think? Yeah, the introductory one, we can move right on to this. So the Global Grant Scholarships are something that should not be confused with a Peace Fellowship. It's a very different program, different sets of criteria, even though it may look like it overlaps a bit. And at the same time, it shouldn't be confused with the district scholarships, which are for a completely different level of study. So there's a number of things that cause a certain amount of confusion here. So the Global Grant Scholarship are scholarships that are funded by a global grant, hence the kind of uninteresting or boring or unimaginative name. And basically what these do is they provide funding for a year of graduate study outside of Canada. So any program would be eligible as long as the focus of the program is in some way related to one of the Rotary Foundation's areas of focus. And we'll be hearing lots about them, so I don't particularly need to go reading through them here, that the 7 areas are really important. So the student has to be interested in doing graduate work in that area, in an area that is related to one of the areas of focus. If we can move to the next slide, please. So a few important criteria about these scholarships. The value of them is US $30,000, which is actually set by the kind of minimum amount that a global grant project can actually be for. It's funded by the district designated funds and the World Fund match, so there's no cost to the clubs. So that's so in that sense, it's like the Peace Fellowship, and the district basically set aside money for this. You saw that in an earlier slide showing the overview of the budget. We kind of very strongly prefer that a student is starting a new program of study. In other words, starting at their first year of a program, if it is a multi-year program. And the main reason for that is that it allows us to be a little bit involved in mentoring the student before they start their program, introducing them to Rotary if they're not familiar with Rotary, that sort of thing. And one of the important criteria that's been set a long time ago by our district board is that we want to fund scholarships through this program for students from this district. So we're looking at somebody who is from here going to study outside of Canada. And like the Peace Fellowship, very important ineligibility of Rotarians and their descendants and ancestors. And this is a long-standing Rotary rule that basically we're trying to avoid, or we're trying not to be looking like we're trying to support our own in this through this program. This is really to be supporting people broadly from the community. So next slide, please. The application process is kind of a complicated one. That's where I come in as chair of the committee, spend a lot of time dealing with these things. We're kind of at the stage now where we're advertising and hoping to identify candidates. We have a district application deadline on the 21st of January next year, and the application form is on the district website. And this is, of course, a public-facing application form because we do accept applicants from essentially from off the street. But club support is really very helpful, and we like to see someone who knows something about Rotary or has some connection to Rotary already. That always helps because it makes the application stronger and makes the candidate more likely to be an effective global grant scholar. Then after we go through this, then after we receive the applications, the committee reviews them, and the scholarship team then decides who we're going to be nominating for these scholarships after interviewing the likely candidates. And then my role, really, and I'm calling it district here, but the role basically is to find international partner clubs or districts and then prepare a global grant application to the Rotary Foundation. This is, and we'll be hearing more about this in the next blocks, but this is very much the same way that any global grant works, in that you have to work with an international partner. So it's a partnership between us sponsoring the student and a Rotary club or district in the area where the university is located. And that involves all the same paperwork for a global grant application. And then sometime in the fall, and always after the 1st of July of 2022 is what we're talking about. So after the 1st of July, the upcoming year, the scholarship recipient then can begin their studies. And that may be a lot after, if it's a Southern Hemisphere school that they're going to, in which case it might not be until beginning of 2023. So it's a very long cycle of preparation for this. And I think I should also add that because of our early deadlines, sometimes the students do not yet know whether they've been accepted into the program. And so that's okay. You can apply for the scholarship before the acceptance. Of course, the final approval is conditional on the acceptance to the program. Next slide, please. And so the information here, it's the very same place that Marie was pointing us to, the Rotary 5360.ca, pardon me, with the Service Grants Global Scholarship Funding. And that's a page where we have the link to the application form, my contact information, and information, bios of our past scholarship recipients. And just to kind of give an indication of this, I'll move on to the next slide, please. and just highlight here a few of our recent recipients to give an idea of the range of programs that they're involved in. So Sari Ozada, University of Oxford, just finished or is almost finished a Master of Science in Environmental Change Management. And she's an interesting one in that she actually would this year have gone through the environment area, but we actually put her through before the environment area became official. And so she went under peace and conflict resolution, which was fine. And that's an indication of how we sometimes have to be a little creative in linking these things, but the themes of the foundation are so broad that we can do a lot of interesting things. Dominika Igbelina completed is at London School of Economics and Political Science and MSc in Global Health Policy. And he just started a job with the UNICEF Office of Research in London. So he's staying in England. Mairead Whalen, a couple of years ago, did a Master of Science in Water Science Policy and is now working on a World Health Organization pandemic research data collection project. And Ahmed Ali did his MBA in international business in emerging markets. I was particularly interested in, as I now started a career with a company, in issues of how to facilitate and manage immigrant remittances to third world countries. So he's now working with a company that is trying to facilitate these things through online, through an app that's much more efficient than banks or Western Union, which is it's a very interesting way of sort of linking economics and business to some of the development issues that Rotary is so interested in. So I guess next slide, if I may. So beyond that, I'd just like to thank the members of the team. There's a bit of overlap with the Peace Fellowship team. I don't think I need to read off all of the names here. You can see these. And so thank you for everyone that's working with me on this. And just the same as Marie, I'd like to invite anyone who's interested in getting involved to let me know, because we're always looking for new members. And this is a committee that really is very rewarding in the ways in which we're contributing to the professional development of people who will advance in their careers the interests of Rotary and particularly our 7 areas of focus. And that's basically it for me. And I think there's a few questions that have been here on the side here on the chat. Are we doing questions now, or are we?
Yes, we can take some questions now. We've hit the end of the first segment. We're right on time. So if there are any questions about the Peace Grant, some Peace Fellowship, or any global scholarships, now is the time. I've also got one here on the MOU, which I'll just tackle straight off, which is basically someone wanting to know when there'll be a template for the financial plan. Because this is newish, the requirement has always been there, but we're going to put a template on the website for the very first time. Give us a few weeks. I've got the draft, but we'll want to review it, have it circulated amongst the team. So I would expect that financial plan template will be available on the website in about 2 to 3 weeks. And because it is new, I will circulate an email to all the attendees of this session that it is available to upload on the website as soon as I post it. So that was the only one I think I saw in relation to the MOU. There's a question about expanding on the criteria of 5 to 7 years experience in a related field. And is this a post undergraduate degree? So Marie, I believe you already answered that the Peace Fellowship is a postgraduate degree.
And I could add to that the 5 to 7 years experience is what typically has been seen for successful applicants for a Peace Fellowship. I believe on the criteria, it is 3 years experience to 5 years experience. So there is a possibility of looking at less years of experience, but in our experience, they usually have more than less.
Okay, thank you, Murray. Any others?
There's one question here that I think is directed at my section. Someone's asking, Rhea is asking, would an Interact member be qualified to apply? Well, given that Interact is high school level, it'd be very unlikely they would be going to graduate studies from being from Interact. But that raises the question, though, of which I don't actually know the answer to, with the changes in the way that Rotaract is being brought up to or treated as more equivalent to Rotary clubs, whether the exclusion for would apply to Rotaract members. And I'm going to have to get back to you on that, because that is actually a very valid, a good question that is implied, I think, in this one, that we need to get some clarification on. Because in the past, Rotaract has been fully, members have been actually eligible for the global grant scholars. So someone like Sari has been involved in Rotaract for a while when she was at Queen's University. So this was something that is something that we need to check into.
So I would be interested in that too.
So if I could,
maybe Kurt has an answer to that.
Yes, if I could interject.
Yes,
yes.
Please.
According to the current elevation rules, because the movement of Rotaract to become a club type within the Rotary International family, that they use the Rotary International uses the term elevation. The current statement of elevation says that Rotaractors are eligible for these two types of grants.
So
now
the elevation is not changing anything
at the moment. It may change going forward, but at the moment, that's because this is happening in steps rather than all at one big everything. So it's a gradual transition.
Thank you, Kurt.
And there was a question also, does the Peace Scholarship applicant have to come from District 5360? They typically have come from the district, but as of rules a couple of years ago, I believe in the last year or so, applicants can come from anywhere. They just have to, sort of establish a relationship, and we could interview somebody who's from Africa, and that was set up because sometimes in other places, it's difficult to find a Rotary Club and get interviews in that location where they are already located. So it is possible to have somebody from another district have an interview and be vetted in our district.
Okay, thank you. So if there are no other questions at this point, just a final comment I received here from Brian Carnahan, a reminder to everyone that all these programs benefit from contributions to the Rotary Foundation. So thanks for that comment, Brian, that's spot on. And as I said, we're right on time here, so I think that we can take a break for 10 minutes, and then when we come back just after the top of the hour, we'll get into the various district project grants, scholarships, and youth programs. So we'll see everybody in about 10 minutes. This next section is really going to be focused on the district project grants of various kinds. But before I get into that, I've been asked to make just a comment on the impacts that COVID-19 has been having on some of our grants. So I'll just say that while it is true that RI travel restrictions are in place, and at least until the end of the year, it is still worthwhile for clubs to apply for travel-related grants. And the reason is that clubs, when they apply for grants for the 2022 year, actually have 2 years in which to execute those projects. So if during that period the travel restrictions do lift, it would be nice to have the grants in hand that you can actually go ahead and do the travel and do the various other programs that are currently on hiatus, rather than wait for the travel restrictions to lift and then realize you haven't got the grant to actually do anything. So I would certainly encourage people to consider getting the grant applications in. The other thing that I wanted to mention here is that if a club fails to execute their project within that 2 years, then they're obligated to return those funds to RI. And for some projects that were funded in 2019 and then ran into the COVID-19 travel restrictions, that deadline has come up. So now some of those 2019 travel related grants must be returned to the Rotary Foundation. And the key thing here is that any outstanding grant returns or overdue reporting for that matter will be preventing clubs from receiving their funds in the current Rotary year. So we did receive the district block grant in mid-September, and we've been able to pay out to roughly half the clubs in the district so far. But the other half can't yet receive their funds because we've still got these outstanding items around grant returns from 2019 or overdue reporting. So please ensure that you get your overdue reports in so that we can release those funds to you. So now I'm going to call on Lynn Exton, a member of the Youth Program Grants team, to cover off the various kinds of district project grants that we've got available, starting with the youth programs. So Lynn, if you're ready to go, I've got your first slide teed up, and just signal to me if I miss the transition that you'd like to make.
Okay.
So Lynn, we're over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And good morning, everybody. I'll be taking you through the youth program grants, the undergraduate scholarships, and last but not least, the district community development grants. So a couple key points here on the youth programs. First of all, the maximum grant amount is $2,000. That has not changed. And the club has to contribute an additional 50% for a total of 3,000 Canadian. And as with several of the other grants, pooling among clubs is indeed permitted. On the right-hand side of the slide, you will see a sample of what the application form looks like. One thing that I want to bring your attention to is that the club can apply for 2 applications. But it is very important that the applications be labeled, be marked priority 1 or priority 2, because of course, hopefully we have enough money to fund both priority 1 and priority 2. But if we don't, then of course the priority 1s will be funded ahead of the priority 2s. Here, once again, is a sample of what the application looks like. We've done a few tweaks to it. So be sure if you did apply last year that you have a look at the new and improved grant applications, youth program applications. Next slide, please. In terms of eligible expenses, there are quite a few what is eligible and ineligible expenses. These are detailed in with a lot of additional words and small print that you need to be mindful of if you are applying for these. I'm not going to go through them all, but if on the application forms themselves, you will see the fine print. But very importantly is that air travel is possible, and it does not need to be arranged through TRF. Now, of course, this is all predicated on whether Rotary will allow for travel. So some of this that is in the slide is the programs overall, but of course, as we've been living through COVID now for the last almost 2 years, as you know, things are changing constantly. So as you look at these slides, remember that these are the core requirements for the program grants, but that at any particular time, there may be things that do not apply because we can't travel, for example. Next slide, please. Yeah, so as I said, on the ineligible expenses, next slide. Just be sure that that you are mindful of these. As you can see, there are some fees, some expenses, entertainment, Rotaract family, optional expenses, etc., that are non-reimbursable. Thank you. Next slide, please. Also very important, of course, is the topic of receipts. And basically, we need a receipt for everything. And they need to be from a third party, arm's length third party provider. And it's good to think through the form and the who will be issuing the receipt ahead of any expenditures. And if you have any questions about what is acceptable as a receipt, Gail Williams and her team will be happy to help you. It's good to get checked in advance, as I said, so that you avoid any nasty surprises as you try at the end of the grant, try to submit the receipts that do not conform with the requirements. Next slide, please. So once again, applying for the youth program grants, everything you want to know, all the information is on our District 5360 website. This is the page, what the page should look like, and the red circles around the relevant forms that you will want to look for. Those have been updated, so please be sure that you have gone to the District 5360 website and downloaded the most current versions. Next slide, please. Undergraduate scholarship grants. As with the youth grants, the maximum amount is 2,000 Canadian dollars, and the club has to contribute an extra 50% for a total of $3,000. Next slide. And once again, this is pooling is allowed for this. The kinds of expenses, scholarship or tuition expenses that are allowable under this grant are undergraduate study, including university, trade schools, and technical schools. So pretty broad. And also the clubs themselves, each club establishes the eligibility criteria, and the selection of the recipients is also to the sole discretion of the club. And the monies, though, are to flow directly to the post-secondary institution and not to the student, if at all possible. And so there are no minimum amounts. The clubs can offer more than one scholarship if they want. And pooling is indeed possible if you want to work with another club to provide a larger scholarship. So next slide, please. Here, once again, the prioritization is important. The maximum number of applications that any club can submit is 2, and they need to be labeled priority 1 or priority 2. And if they're not, then the both applications will be disqualified. So note the print, what is highlighted in red on the left of the slide. And on the right-hand side of the slide, you see a screenshot of what the application looks like and where on the application form you will indicate the prioritization. Next slide, please. Here, you're going to be experts at District 5360's website by the end of today's grant seminar, but this is here once again a screenshot of our our district 5360 website. And specifically circled in red is the material applicable to these district undergraduate scholarship grants. Next slide, please. Next topic is the district community development grants. And this is a new name for what we used to call the district project grants. We found that there was some confusion in terms of the district grants committee, which is the big committee that covers everything that we're covering in today's 3-hour seminar, and the actual community project development grants. So we have renamed it, but what it does has not changed. So, and the grant awards, same amounts as last year, 750 to 7,500 Canadian dollars. And the club needs to match on the basis of 3-to-1. So if you are applying, if the club is applying for a $7,500 grant, then the club needs to put in $2,500 of club funds. And they can be used for the grant amounts can be used for either local or international projects. And if you want to see a sample of the kind of grants that were funded last year, and indeed over quite a few years, you will find the list of all the projects that received the district grant project grant amounts. The district project grant funds listed on our website. And you will see the range of types of projects that we have funded, a nice mix of both district-wide as well as international, and a range of different natures of the projects. So if you are thinking about a possible project and you would need some inspiration, I would invite you to go to our district website and review the list. It is quite impressive. Next slide, please. Grant pooling is allowed, and indeed every year we see several clubs. In fact, I think there was one grant last year. I think we had something like 7 different clubs, maybe 8 in the district, all working together. But there has to be one lead club for the overall application, and each club needs to apply to submit a separate application. And one thing that we want to highlight, though, is the last bullet on this slide. Each club must prioritize the pool grant as the same. So if it's labeled a priority 1 by the lead club, all the other clubs that are pooling with it must also label it as a priority 1. There was some confusion over this last year, so I wanted to reinforce that point so that those of you who are very familiar with this, that you are aware of this tweak or this clarification that we have received in the last couple of months. Next slide, please. The provisions, I think, are very much the same as last year. And as I've said before, each of the applications must be prioritized, priority 1, priority 2. Last year, we did pretty well this last Rotary year in funding all the priority 1s. And I think all, maybe except maybe one priority 2 application were funded. We were very lucky. We had a healthy number of applications, but as you know, our district really benefits from a very healthy amount of and quite respectful amounts of money that we can put towards the grants. It's one of the higher in North America, if I'm not mistaken. So don't be bashful, as I said, if you're thinking about projects, because we've had a very good track record in terms of being able to to fund many, if not all, over the last couple of years. Next slide, please. And so, yeah, this just walks you through how the decisions are made. If we have more applications than we can fund, the decision is made by the district grants subcommittee team. And yeah, so if there's enough money after we fund the priority ones, we will fund the priority twos. And the ranking system is, you can see everything there on the District 5360 website. And but once the decisions have been made, they are final. So next slide, please. Reporting requirements, once again, very important that you think through how, what the receipts in particular and how you will do the reporting. They are due 60 days after the completion of the project, and the forms are available on our District 5360 website. We basically need receipts for everything. And so be sure that as you are thinking through the projects that you have, that detail is not overlooked, and ensure that the total amount spent are 133% or greater than the grant award. In other words, if you spent $10,000, the receipts have to be at least for that amount, if not higher. And any questions on receipts and reporting, once again, I would encourage you to talk to Gail Williams and her team before you actually sit down and start dispersing monies, et cetera. So there's no misunderstandings and no surprises. Next slide, please. So yeah, the application forms, once again, I think we've made some tweaks to it in the last year, but they are all available on the District 5360 website. So be sure, though, that you've got the most current versions of the form. And because if you send in the old forms, they'll be returned to you, they'll slow down the application process, etc. So please be mindful of that. Next slide, please. These next couple of slides, which I'm not going to go through in detail, but are included in the slide deck for your reference, are possible other sources of monies for grants available to Rotary clubs in our district. So there's the Community Grants Program. Next slide. The CIP, the community initiatives, the community facilities. Next slide. And last but not least, yeah, as I said, all of the small print on all of these are available on the respective websites. So I would ask you to, if you are interested, to go to the websites and check for the most recent updates from the province of Alberta, or from whoever the donors, those providing the funding and what their requirements are. So that ends my section. And I'll turn it back to Craig, and I'll be happy, though, to answer any questions. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Lynn. I see there was a couple of questions came up around use of AGLC funds in the chat. It looks like the questions were well answered there. I'll just wait to see if anyone wants to chime in on it. But basically, I think the question was whether or not the clubs could use AGLC funds as their component of a grant application to then get the uplift of the district funds. And the caution that I'm seeing is that the AGLC funds are exclusively targeted towards projects within Alberta, so an international project might be problematic. But just to note a comment from Kurt here that our Rotary District is not an expert on the ins and outs of AGLC rules. So I think people would need to look more carefully at exactly what those rules are before going down that path. Are there any other questions for Lynn here on the district project, the community development projects, the district-based scholarships and youth programs? If there are not, I can blast through a couple of quick things here because they're primarily travel related, won't dwell on them too much. District travel grants, we've not allocated anything for them in this cycle, but if you feel there's a benefit to them, particularly in that 2-year window, I would certainly not want to discourage people from applying. But the purpose of a district travel grant is basically to subsidize travel to develop a humanitarian project in collaboration with a host Rotary partner. So in effect, these travel grants are really designed to help clubs with the community assessments that they need to do at the front end of preparing an application for a global grant. And the eligibility will include Rotarians from the district who are traveling in support of project initiatives. Because we are starting to look at a partnership that will ultimately lead to a global grant, we will require a letter of invitation from a host Rotary club in another country. The applicant must be on site for minimum 5 days, maximum 30 days as they're conducting the community assessments. And the current contact information for the district grant travel team lead is Andrew Bronson. Again, we have additional information on the travel grants on our Rotary5360.org website. So you'll find the application form there. And just remember that when we apply for grants of that type, you basically have the 2 years. But the scheduling is in fact a little bit more flexible than for some of the other kinds of grants, because they are one, relatively small expenditures in nature, and two, they typically are inputs to a larger application for a global grant. So a little bit more flexibility available there. I'm going to go on now to the vocational training teams. Really, the key point here to take away is there are in fact 2 kinds of vocational training team grants available. There's one available as a district project grant, and there's another one that's basically available, if you like, as an uplift onto a global grant application through some district designated funding. So VTT stands for Vocational Training Team, and a vocational training team is a group of professionals who will travel to another country to learn more about the profession or to impart knowledge to teach professionals about a particular field. The travel for a VTT can be in both directions. So a group based out of Alberta can travel to another country, or Rotarians and program partners from projects in other countries can in fact come to Canada. One particular grant can support the travel of more than one team, and not all members of the team need to be Rotarians. So if there are particular subject matter experts who are adding value to the team, those people can certainly be included in the travel without necessarily being Rotarians. And I think I covered off a lot of that. So I'm just going to go on and say here that travel can be arranged by either the team members of the team or an organizer in the club. When traveling on a VTT, a vocational training team, all the travelers have to have insurance. And in fact, anybody who's practicing in a medical discipline will need to satisfy additional insurance requirements. So as mentioned, there are 2 kinds of vocational training team grant. You can apply to the district through the Rotary5360.org website for a district VTT. Another kind of VTT is the one that's embedded in a global grant, and you would apply using the normal process for global grants through the RI Grants website to get that project set up. But a global grant with an embedded vocational training team can qualify for an additional $5,000 worth of district designated funds. You'll see an example of that in the next section following the next break, where we do some Rotary math, and that'll show how the additional $5,000 can be applied. And this is, of course, subject to the provision that there is, in fact, sufficient funds in the available. For district vocational training teams, the scope is a little more flexible than for the one where the VTT is embedded in a global grant, because for the embedded global grant, all of the global grant rules apply. But in general, for the district VTT, teams must be in possession of relevant experience and preferably led by a Rotarian. I think, as mentioned, cooperating organizations can be included in the team. They can be run by a single Rotary club. They don't require the invitation of a host, as you would see for a global grant. And the other thing I should mention here is that Rotary Foundation maintains a list of countries that are currently off limits to Rotary travel, and this is usually due to political or disaster situations in other countries. That list is maintained by the Rotary Foundation. We do have a link to that list on the 5360.org website. That list is updated from time to time, so certainly check to make sure, if you're planning to travel to another country, that the Rotary Foundation has cleared that country for travel as a destination. The district vocational training team grants must support the RI mission of health, education, and poverty and environment, as you would expect. And the maximum award is $7,500. Club contribution must be $2,500 or 30% to get the maximum amount of the award. We only allow one grant application per club, and multiple clubs can apply on the same VTT as a pool, but only one pool application will be accepted per club. For the global vocational training teams, we must satisfy all of the global grant requirements, including support for an area of focus. The invitation from a host Rotary club or district in the country where the project is going to take place is required, and must meet the minimum size of the Rotary Foundation's global grant to receive the maximum amount of DDF. Typically, a team will have to include a Rotarian leader with relevant experience. So our key dates for application for the district VTT, it's like all of the other district grants, the May 1st deadline, and those awards are announced in mid-September of 2022. The application form for those is available on the District 5360.org website. The VTTs do have a little bit of supplemental documentation. So there's the basic district VTT project application form, which has to be completed. But on successful award of the grant for the VTT, for the travel team, there is a separate VTT Memorandum of Understanding that has the specific terms and conditions that has to be executed before the travel actually takes place. And as well, there needs to be a little biography according to a standard form for each member of the team who's traveling. These latter two items can be completed after the grant is awarded, but certainly before the travel takes place. Couple of additional items. this is really just for the section in general, is that there have been some videos put together. Some of these are in the process of being updated. The CIP and TRF websites are there for reference as well. So that's really it for the section. I did see a couple of questions fly by here as Lynn and I were presenting. One I wanted to highlight in particular, if I can find it. Gail Williams pointed out that when I was speaking of the travel grants, the travel must be completed within 6 months of the grant approval. So I think I had mentioned that the 2 years was at play here. That's actually incorrect. It is 6 months within the application being approved. And I'm just going to go through some of the questions here. There's quite a few of them. I'm going to ask Lynn about this one if you're still available. This is in relation to the various kinds of grants. This is a question: can each club apply to more than one grant, or is there a maximum? And Lynn, there, you're unmuted. Yes.
Yeah, sorry. Can you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, so the question is basically around the maximum numbers of applications that can be put forward for each grant type and how they combine together.
Well, each club can submit 2 applications, okay, of each type. So you can apply for a scholarship, and you can also apply for a youth grant, for example, but you can only apply for only 2 applications per type.
Right. And I think that's what Jamie answered as well. I saw this in the chat window also. Jamie says each club can apply for 2 types of each grant. We look at all the priority ones first, and if there are still funds, that's when we move on to the priority 2s. Here's one as well. With COVID as it is, has Rotary determined when travel can take place? To my knowledge, the current restriction on travel is stated to December 31st of this year. That particular date has been extended a few times, so it would not surprise me if it extends again. But as it stands right now, officially it's December 31st, although I suspect it'll go on longer than that. Shut down till at least the end of the year. That's right. Yeah, and Jamie has responded as well that current travel is restricted December 31st and will be reevaluated at that time. I think given that much of the world is not nearly as far along in its vaccine rollouts as we are here in North America, it's reasonable to expect that the travel restrictions probably will be extended into 2022. And if there are no other questions, this might be a good opportunity, a little bit of a shorter section here, to take another 10 minutes. We're running now a little bit ahead of schedule, which is fantastic. When we get back, we'll dive into the global grants, the details of that, and Jamie will be presenting those.
I'm ready whenever you are, Craig.
Okay, there's just a note has come in here that I think bears repeating, so I'll read it off. And that is that in the event that the scope of a project changes from what's been described in the application, it's important to actually get permission to do that. So you cannot, as a club, apply for a project to do one thing and then take those funds and do something else with them. So it's important to request permission from the committee before expending the funds on an altered scope. And we've seen numerous cases where clubs have run into issues doing exactly that. So now I'm going to turn the mic over to our District Rotary Foundation Chair, Jamie Morehouse, who's going to be walking us through the global grants.
All right. Whoops, that's not the right slide that's up there. It went the wrong way. There we go. All right. As Craig said, I'm, those of you who don't know me, I'm Jamie Morehouse. I am the District Foundation Chair, and the team lead for global grants for the district is Leslie Biles, and she unfortunately couldn't be with us this morning. So instead you get the B team, you get me. So global grants, what are we going to talk about? We're going to talk a little bit about what they are, how they're funded, what changes are, the DDF that's available for global grants, and then a little bit about how you get started on a global grant. So next slide. So what are global grants? Well, Rotary's definition of a global grant is a global grant supports large international activities with sustainable, measurable outcomes in Rotary's areas of focus. Grant sponsors form international partnerships that respond to real community needs. That is a fantastic definition of what a global grant is. I tend to think of them a little more simple. To me, global grants are simply the absolute best tool we have as Rotarians to leverage funds to make significant impacts for good around the world. And how we do that is in kind of three different ways with global grants. There's humanitarian projects, scholarships for graduate level academic studies, which Hendrik has already spoken about, and vocational training teams that Craig has spoken about. So next one. So a couple of need to know kind of must have things for global grants are every global grant needs to have at least 2 Rotary clubs involved. They need to have what's called a host Rotary club, which is a Rotary club in the host country or the country that the project is taking place in. And they have to have an international partner. So typically 99.9% of all the global grants that our district do are someplace other than our district. So we are very much almost always the international partner on a global grant. But that doesn't have to be the case, because a global grant can be anywhere in the world, including Canada. All the clubs and districts involved in a global grant must be qualified with the Rotary Foundation. So just like to get district grants, our clubs need to be qualified with the district. In order to get the foundation funds, our district has to be qualified with the Rotary Foundation. All global grants have to be a minimum of $30,000 US. And the maximum amount you can get from the World Fund is $400,000. And now that's not to be confused with the maximum size of a project. The maximum amount from the World Fund is the amount that you're allowed to match. So you can only get a maximum of $400,000 from RI or from the foundation, but the project can be big, has to be bigger than that in order to get that much money from them. And again, global grants are just all about leveraging the club's funds to do good in the world. And the next one. And we as Rotarians are pretty darn good at using global grants to do good in the world. In the 2019-20 year, the foundation approved 1,359 global grants for a total of $95.6 million awarded. So that is a lot of money, and a lot of good happens with that. So where do we get that money from? We've kind of talked about it a little bit. All of that money comes from us, from Rotarians. All of our donations to the annual fund go to the Rotary Foundation, where they hold the funds for 3 years, and then return all the funds back to the district. And it comes back to us in kind of two buckets of money. 50% of the funds go to the World Fund, which is trustee controlled, and the Rotary Foundation controls those funds. And that's used in the World Fund is what all the matching that happens in global grants comes out of the World Fund. And it also helps fund peace centers and Polio Plus and global scholarships. The other 50% comes back to the district in what's called district designated funds. And as the name might imply, that those are funds that the district can decide what to do with. There's one major rule, and that is that all district designated funds have to be split in two, with a minimum of 50% of those going towards DDF for global grants. And so what we do in our district is we just split the money in the middle. 50% goes to district grants, which are all the grants that Lynn spoke of. And then the other 50% goes to the DDF for global grants, which we're about to speak about. So move on. There haven't been a lot of funding changes. I just wanted to note that the CIP program, there's some discussion in the chat, and it has been mentioned. They don't fund international projects, so it makes it's not likely that you're going to be able to use CIP funds in a global grant. But if a global grant was happening in Alberta, you could potentially use CIP funds. Sadly, the Rotary Foundation Canada and Government of Canada matching program is long over now, and with no revival in sight, which is very unfortunate. But the World Fund minimum has been eliminated. You used to have a minimum of $15,000 in your World Fund match in order to qualify for a global grant. That minimum is gone. And then in the latter half of last year, TRF made the decision that they had to go to only matching district designated fund contributions at 80%, and not matching any no cash contributions from the club. So only district designated funds are matched, and only at 80%. And another one is the international funding requirement dropping from 30% to 15%. Excuse me. This one is, most of the time we don't really even think about this international funding requirement, because what it means is, with the new number, that 15% of the funds for a project have to come, a minimum of 15% of the funds for a project have to come from outside the host country. So for us, we rarely do anything inside Canada, so it's never really affected us. But the opportunity with it dropping from 30% to 15% means that there could be some opportunities to try and get some global grants happening in our own backyard instead of only other places. So DDF is always in US dollars. So all the numbers I'm going to talk about are US dollars, including club contribution dollars. Those are US dollar amounts. And as Craig had mentioned, in 2022-23, there's roughly 221,000 available for DDF. There are two types of grants available: a lead club and a supporting club. And all the funds are allocated on a first come, first served basis, and there is only one bucket of money. So once the applications are open, we start at the first one and go until the bucket of money is empty, whether that's a lead club or a supporting club. We just go down the list. There's no differentiation there. And again, just a reminder that DDF global grant funding is now only 80 cents on the dollar. So to get the lead club DDF, first off, you need to have a global grant number to link the application to. So that means you have to have gone on to My Rotary and started a global grant application. As soon as you start one, you'll have a number, and it is that global grant number that is what the DDF is linked to. The first date for applications to open for the Rotary year, for DDF from the Rotary year 22-23 is April 1st, 2022. We open the applications up prior to the year beginning in order to try and have all of the review and any questions and things worked out so that clubs, as soon as July 1st hit, clubs know that they have their approvals and they can hit the ground running right away, don't have to wait. Lead clubs, DDF always has to be awarded to a club within our district, but it can be we can be the international or the host club and still apply for the lead club DDF. Every club has a maximum of 3 applications per year. So we can do 3 applications per year for a lead club, and the Magic website is where you'll find the application forms under the documentation tab. So what is a lead club application? Well, for a minimum of $4,000 US from the club, the district will contribute $15,000 US. And then any club contributions over the $4,000 minimum amount will be matched 1-to-1 to a maximum of 15,000 additional DDF dollars for funding. And if there's a vocational training team component to your global grant, there's another $5,000 US available. So what does that look like? This is the math portion of the show. With the minimum club contributions, your club puts in $4,000. The lead club DDF is $15,000. That gets run through the Rotary Foundation with their 80% world match, and that brings you to a $31,000 project. So with the minimum club contributions, you exceed the minimum threshold for a project size for a global grant. So you can start a global grant with just your minimum 1 club contribution. However, if you are fortunate and can max out your club contributions for DDF, then you would essentially your club would put up a total of $19,000. You get $15,000 for the first $4,000, get you $15,000. The next $15,000 gets you another $15,000. We take that and run it all through TRF. Give another $24,000 in matching, and your project comes out to funding total comes out to $73,000. So Rotary math may have changed a little, but it is still a pretty amazing way to leverage your dollars. And there's one other step. If you actually have a VTT inside your global grant, and you can max out all your other DDF contributions, you can end up with a project total of $82,000. So we'll go on to the supporting club. So again, you need a global grant number to link the application to. The applications open at the same time. Where these differ is that supporting club DDF can support any global grant anywhere in the world. The lead club doesn't have to be in our district. So if you have a good relationship with a Rotary club elsewhere in the world and they're doing a global grant you can apply to have a supporting club DDF and have that support sent to them. You're allowed one application per year, and any number of clubs can support one global grant project. So you can have 2 or 3 or 4 clubs all supporting the same global grant project. And again, you'll find the application form on rotary5360.org under the documentation tab. So what is a supporting club? So for a minimum cash donation from your club of $2,000 US, you get $5,000 in DDF, which means that ultimately when it ends up getting all run through everything, your $2,000 cash donation ends up affecting the $11,000 worth of funding. So it's a pretty effective use of $2,000. But as I said, the thing with supporting clubs is you can have more than one with each global grant. So an example of if your club's got the lead and you put your $4,000 in, and you've got 2 other Rotary clubs in on board. They each put their 2,000 in, which that means you would get that means you'd end up with $25,000 of DDF, 15,000 from your club, 5,000 each from each of the other 2 clubs, and then run that through the World Fund, and now you've got $53,000, which is pretty impressive. But the math gets even better if you can max out all your other contributions, and you have 2 other clubs. You can end up with $104,000 total project. And again, all of these dollars are US dollars. Everything is in there. Sorry, just looking into this. So yeah, 2. So yeah, so that's the math behind it. So how do you get started on a global grant? Well, global grants have a lot of moving parts, and Rotary has some fantastic learning tools to help you navigate through those parts. These are for the most used ones for me, and you can find all of these on myrotary.org, and you can download them, and they'll be extremely helpful. Some of the basic elements of a global grant are you need to identify a project and a partner. Obviously, your partner is very important in a global grant because remember, every global grant has to have at least 2 Rotary clubs, the host club and the international club. And it's expected that there's significant involvement from both clubs in order to get the project done. It is not a case of just signing your name on your club's name onto it, and then you'll see it at the end. Your club is responsible. Responsible for seeing the project through and making sure that all the rules and guidelines are followed, and that what is expected to happen is actually happening. So you need to have a really good relationship between both Rotary clubs. Every global grant has to have a training component. You can't just buy stuff and give it to people. The goal for global grants is to have a sustainable project, which means that the project can continue after we're done, after the grant funds are finished and we've gone on. So in order to do that, we need to make sure that there's an education and training component with what we're whatever we're doing. So if you're buying or you want to get an X-ray machine for a hospital, you can't just buy the X-ray machine and send them a check to buy it. You also have to make sure that there's a training component and education how do you use the machine? What's it used for? How do you maintain it? There needs to be a plan for further maintenance. Who's going to pay for that? Things like that. And the project must also result in a cohesive, measurable outcome. Cannot be a variety of activities that do not have a focus. So that means basically is that there has to be a central focus to the project, and you can have other activities, but they must relate back to whatever that central one is. That it can't just be a wide range of disparate projects. They all have to work together, and they all have to be measurable. And a good way to make sure that that happens is to follow the 6 steps to sustainability that Rotary has laid out. And of course, every global grant has to be in one of our now 7 areas of focus. And now our 7 areas of focus seem fairly general, but projects do get turned down because they don't fall within the areas of focus. So, excuse me, the suggestion would be each one of these areas of focus has a specific policy statement document on my Rotary that you can find. So those documents outline what's acceptable and what isn't, what's considered in the area of focus and what is not, and you have to land within that. So they are pretty flexible, but but those guidelines do exist, and we have to follow through on them. Then this has mentioned the 6 steps to sustainability. So the sustainability aspect is huge in global grants. Every global grant needs to be sustainable. Has to outlast, the project has to outlast our involvement with it. So there are a few ways to try and ensure that happens, and that always starts with the community itself that you're going to work in. The more local ownership you have of a project, the better. So you need to go out into the community, talk with people, get them excited about it. Most importantly, find out from them exactly what it is they need. It doesn't do anyone any good to go in and tell them what they need. You need to listen to the community and let them tell us what we need. We can make a suggestion what we think, and then work from there. Again, we need to provide training, and whenever possible, we need to buy local. We need to the more involvement we can have with locals, the better. And in a perfect world, we'd find local funding either through government or hospitals or other NGOs, because the more local funding you have, the more money they have into a project, the more they're going to care about it, and they're the ones that live there, so they're the ones that really need to care about it. And again, we have to measure our success. Measuring the outcomes is a big thing. We need to be able to show what it was like before we got there, what we did, and then how that changed. Went the wrong way. There we go. So a few steps to make sure that maybe increasing the impact of the global grant, and that always starts with, oops, no, wrong one. It always starts with the community needs assessment. Now, global grants now are required to have a community needs assessment done. So you can't get a global grant without including a community needs assessment. So Rotary has developed this resource tool document, which has a number of different types of community assessments. It's not a one thing serves everything. There's different ways to do a community assessment. There's templates for what questions you need to ask, and what certainly a template for what what the community needs final report will look like that's included in your global grant. As part of that needs assessment, a big part of that is determining the need, determining the inputs needed to conduct the project, and the inputs can be not just the materials, but also the human resources required, what's available, volunteer hours, funding, all of those things need to be part of it. And we have to consider the recipients of the project. How many people will be impacted? How will they be impacted by the project? Have we included all of the potential demographics of the project? Have we don't want to overlook any maybe underrepresented members of the community. And it's never too early to start thinking about how you're going to measure those outcomes. And one of the reasons that the Rotary keeps talking about measuring the outcomes is that if we have great measurables, not only do we know what we did, but that also gives us a basis moving forward for the next project. Now we know how we did it, and makes it easier to convince or get other people excited about a project. You can say, you know, we put in this many biosand filters and we reduced disease by this much. Isn't that a fantastic thing? Wouldn't you like to be involved? So we have some hard data on the outcomes of things. And will the project address the needs of the community? Well, if we did our community needs assessment, it darn well better be. But the reason that's really in there is that these projects, between planning and implementation to the end, they can drag on for a year or two, and it's possible to maybe drift a little off the focus. So it's a question that you need to just keep reminding yourself of: is what I'm doing focus? Like, is it an important part of the plan, or have we drifted off course here a little, or we need to recorrect? And the last two items on that list there, don't keep it a secret, and how you keep your members engaged. Keeping your club members engaged is super important, because we want to do more and more of these projects, and the members get excited about quality projects, and it's exciting, and it's fantastic to be able to go out and say our club did provide clean water for 1,000 people, whatever it is. And the more engaged they are, the more apt they are to either, when you're going to try and do your next project, it'll be a little easier to get people to help you out, or it'll spark it'll cause a spark to ignite into somebody to start their own project, and we can move on from that. And the only way we can do that is to not keep it a secret. We have to tell people what we're doing at every chance we get, and that includes your own club. Like, tell the club what you're planning, tell them how it's going, and certainly celebrate when it's over with them. So there's a lot of planning. You need a solid implementation plan with all the activities that you're going to do, the timeline that you're going to do them in, where you're going to do them, with what materials you need. You need to have estimates of all the costs of everything. RI wants you to, when you're doing the planning, it's a living, breathing document, and it changes. By the time you hit submit, once it's in there, TRF thinks that's what you're going to do, and you can't really waver off of it too much, because if you do without asking permission to change, it's going to cost you. So the planning and having a solid plan with cost, because a TRF also limits some costs, like admin costs can only be, I'm sure Kurt will correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's only 10% of the cost can be in admin or costs. And so things like that you have to stay within those limits. And in your plan, don't forget to look for and identify as many sources of funding as you can. So there's your club, other clubs, the community, your community, the host country's community, and any other grants that are available. So if you're thinking about starting an application, a global grant application, I would highly recommend you going to myrotary.org and to visiting the Learning Center and checking out their grant management seminar course, which is the grant seminar is their grant seminar is made up of 10 other courses. And where it differs from our seminar is theirs is completely focused on what they want to see in a global grant. And they're the ones that approve the global grant. So knowing what they want is the most important thing. So it goes through a number of different courses with everything from sustainability assessments to financial management, roles and responsibilities, and the ever important reporting requirements. So I have zero doubt that if you take that class, go through and take that course, it will save you so much grief through the process of making a global grant, because it takes all the guesswork out of what do you think they want with, what do they mean by this? If you go through that course, you'll know what they mean, because they'll tell you what they mean exactly. You know, and honestly, that first grant management seminar is as long as this one is. So it's a bit of a commitment, but it'll be time well spent. And once you've done that once, you don't really need to do it again every time, but they do offer a recertification course in which all of the new things or things that have changed since last year are gone over. So yeah, it's going to save you a lot of time and answer a lot of questions if you go do that. Who can help us in our district? In our district, we are so lucky that most clubs in our district have somebody who's either done a global grant or been a part of working on a global grant. So you don't have to go far generally to find a mentor who's done this before to help you out. If there's nobody in your club that can help you out, you can certainly get in touch with anybody on the district grants committee. And if we can't help you, we could certainly put you in touch with somebody who has been through it before and would be willing to give you a hand. And don't be shy to take advantage of the skill set of the members in your club, even if they're not, you know, they don't want to be maybe don't want to be have their name on the application and that responsibility, but they can certainly help you with any number of items. And you know, there are always two Rotary clubs, so it's not all on you. You have a partner club in the host country club, so they are of course the ones on the ground, so that any questions that come up about that are pertinent to what's happening in the country or how things get done in the country, they're the ones that are going to know what to do. And if that Rotary club doesn't, certainly the NGO will know how to get things done. So so don't be shy on using those resources. And again, Leslie Biles is the Global Grants team lead. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to her. You can always reach out to me as well. And we'll see, we'll do our best to get all your questions answered. And like I said, there are a lot a lot of moving parts to this, so we may not know the answer off the top of our head, but we could certainly, we will certainly make the effort to find out the answer for you if we don't know it. And with that, I guess, speaking of questions, I'll take a look in the chat here and see what's happening. Let's go up here. So, oh yeah, so the program, there's a question. Thanks, Bob, for bringing up the program of scale opportunity. So Rotary has a program that they call the program of scale, in which they award one $2 million grant a year. So honestly, don't know a whole lot about it other than it happened. Again, there's only one a year, and I assume that it is a very intensive application form for that kind of money. But I do know that all of that information is on the RI website. If you search programs of scale, you'll find out everything you need to know. The global grant calculator is on the district website. The 11,000 is US dollars, Joel, always US dollars. Does the lead club apply or the supporting club apply? So the lead club applies for the lead grant, and the supporting club will apply for the supporting grant. So, but generally what you'd want to do, so you'll all be linked to the same global grant number. So they need, you would, they kind of all get sent in together. You kind of talk through your clubs and make sure that all of those go together, and then they're all looked at together. Because as we see, like we look at who the lead club is, and then we look at supporting clubs and tie the supporting grant to the lead one, because without the lead club, then the whole project doesn't happen. So they all get done together. So which is a good reason. If you're going to have a bunch of supporting ones, you need to get them in soon, because you want to make sure there's enough money to cover your lead DDF and all of the supporting DDF that goes with it. There is no minimum. There is no minimum for like we are generally the international club. So in order to get DDF, we have our district minimums. But the host club doesn't necessarily have to put anything in. Doesn't have to. It's nice if they do, but that doesn't always happen. I see there's some comments about, yeah, so there is a 12-month rule. You're supposed, by the time when you start a global grant, you're supposed to submit the global grant within 12 months. And then the DDF and then so it would be submitted. And then generally it takes 1 to 3 months for TRF to approve the submitted grant. So the DDF from the district has a 15-month timeline to allow for the 12 months you have from TRF to get applied, and then the extra 3 months to get it approved. I think I answered that, Graham. Yeah, the host club doesn't have to have any funds. We covered a lot of categories and types of grants. Is there a budget of dollars to be granted for each? No, there's nothing specific. There's a big pot of money, which is the 220-ish thousand, and we just go through the pot. A supporting club does not have to be in the same district as a lead club at all. I'd sorry, maybe that's not a direct message. Anyway, there's a question, does a supporting club have to be in the same district as the lead club? And it does not. You can support a global grant that's happening completely outside in a totally different country. It's fine. I think that looks like I've got to the end of the questions. Unless you know anything else, Craig.
Well, I do see one more here on the list that we haven't touched on yet. The question was, does the district grant information get filed electronically by the Rotary Club so that changing executives can pull out and use to show the club members the importance of donating to TRF? So there's a couple of pieces in that question. So initially, filing electronically. So the district 5360.org website is the portal for submitting electronic applications. And that's where the District Grants Committee does review those applications. It's also the portal where the reports, so this is a nice segue into the next section, get uploaded as well. But in terms of all of the other bits and pieces of supporting information that we may not need to see that gets warehoused within the club itself, this is where the importance of that written financial plan comes in. And the written financial plan has really been identified as an area of do better for clubs in the district. So with the written financial plan, the expectation is that that really will be the source where clubs can transmit all of that supplemental information from one board onto the next. And it's also a really good place where people within a club will be able to pull the information on the projects they've been involved in to try and generate interest in contributing to TRF and basically demonstrating to the club the value of the projects they participate in. So short answer to all that is the certain minimum stuff we need to see as the grants committee goes on their website, but the financial plan really covers the stewardship of information within your own Rotary Club. And I think here's another one, same author, and it really just builds on it. Would it be possible at the beginning of the Rotary year, say July 1, every new club president receive an electronic grant application booklet? The club could make a paper copy for their directors. This presentation should then be easy to follow and should be well indexed. And I think that's exactly what we're talking about as our do better for a district, is that we actually do ensure that with the written financial plan, or it's really a management plan as well, that the information on current and past grants is packaged and transferred into the incoming board for their use in the Rotary year. And I think that covers all the main topics. There have been a few questions here about examples. I'll just say that one of the advantages of the Rotary 5360.org website is that it's really open to anybody with a login in a district, and there are awfully good projects that are well summarized there. And for those who are looking for inspiration for their own projects, by all means, you can look to see what other clubs have done at various points as well. So that's another good jumping off point to obtaining kind of a starting point for putting your own grant together.
I should just clarify one thing. In when it comes to supporting clubs, the global grant that's being supported can be anywhere in the world, but only clubs from within District 5360 can apply for our supported club grant. So So, yeah, so only clubs within our district can apply for the DDF, but that DDF can be supporting a global grant anywhere else in the world. It doesn't have to be within our district.
All right. Well, moving on. Thanks so much, Jamie, for that part of the presentation. That's certainly the meaty part of it. The next piece is a bit on our reporting requirements. So I'll invite Gail Williams to present the reporting piece. Also, as I mentioned earlier, Gail will be transferring this role that she's had for many years. And again, I just want to express my sincere appreciation to Gail for all the work she's done over the years on the reports monitoring. So Gail, you're up for the reports and the reporting requirements.
Okay, I'm ready to go. Hello, everyone, and as introduced, I'm Gail Williams, and I've been in the report monitoring role for, I think it's only 9 years. It feels like more, but I think it's 9. And it's time to move on to other things. Anyways, reporting. Why do you have to report? Well, the funds that you receive from the district are foundation funds, and that is trust funds, and trust funds, the stewardship of that money is held to a higher standard than personal or corporate spending. So we're required by the foundation to have reporting in place, and we follow the terms and conditions of the foundation, and some of the finer details the district has put into place, the district grant committee approved by the district board. And so we're not making up the requirements, we're just following the guidelines. Anyways, as mentioned before, you need to plan what documentation is going to be required, not only as you go into applying, but also what do you need for reporting later on. You don't want to get to the end and find out, oh, you should have been collecting certain information, certain documents, receipts. Receipts are required for all expenditures, and if you can't obtain a receipt when you're in another country, you may take along a receipt book that you get at a dollar store and just have them complete that receipt. You know, if you're taking a rickshaw ride or whatever, just have your receipt book handy in case you need it. The documents have to follow the spending of the money. So when the money goes out the door of the club, a copy of that check is required. And then as the money is spent along the way, you need a clear audit trail right up until the time you're reporting. And the documents, the receipts, need to be provided by an arm's length party. Can't be a Rotarian. A Rotarian cannot receive the money and then turn around and give you a receipt. You want, so that just leads into, you want a clear paper trail for the report reviewers, the stewardship committee, and it could be for an external auditor of the Rotary Foundation. The financial management report that Craig has alluded to, that states in there the requirements for having other people know what's going on, where the documents are, that sort of thing. If you're keeping paper files, make sure they're in a folder, not scattered all over the place. If you're keeping electronic files, keep that file organized. Update those files as you go along. Okay. Again, I'll just reiterate reading those terms and conditions of Rotary Foundation and of the district as you go along. Keep up to date on them, and what's on the grant website will have the current terms and conditions. That's maintained all the time. Okay, next slide, please. Due dates, we have the 2019-2020 grants on here only because there are grants outstanding, and reporting can be up to 2 years after the district has paid the funds to the club. So in 2019, the funds were paid out in September, and there could be some, well, I know there's 8 that are outstanding, and they don't have to report until the absolute reporting date would be the 23rd of March, 22. If you don't know what your reporting date is, you can call me. I can tell you, send me a note, whatever. 2021, same thing. It's 2 years after the district paid the money to the club, or the earlier 60 days following the completion of the project. 21-22, same idea. It'll be 2 years down the road. And when we get into the grants for 22-23, same thing will apply. Reports have to be submitted online through the grant website. Online is not an email to me or a fax, if anyone still uses fax. But please upload them. And if you're having problems because of the size of the file you're trying to update, you've exceeded the 2 megabytes. Break it down into smaller parts. Follow what your mom told you. Don't put everything in your mouth at once. Try to break it down. And if you use PDF, that'll help you rather than trying to use other formats. Okay. Next screen, please. Again, know your reporting requirements before you start your application or before submitting it. And know those guidelines, and that'll help you with what will be eligible and what's not eligible. And if you got any questions, send me a note and I'll try to help you. Okay, and travel grants, if you're using a travel grant, there are stipulations that are not the same as some of like a project grant. You cannot use the money for food and beverages or fancy accommodations. Don't ask for an oceanside view. You have to take what is given. And you cannot do a personal side trip before, during, or after a travel. The business of the purpose of the travel grant has occurred. So you can't tack on a trip at the end of the travel, which is paid for by a travel grant. Okay, and lastly, diarize when your grants are due, because 2 years is a long time to remember, oh, that's got to be in by such and such a date. Okay. Reminders will be sent out, but the onus is upon the club to know when reporting is required. Okay. Next screen, and I think
That's your
it.
last one, Gail.
That's it. That is my last one, the very last one.
Your last one.
Yeah.
It's one question has come in here, which I think is of general interest. So it's from Calgary East. Are reports required for Type C global grants? And I think by Type C, which is our older terminology, I think we're referring to the reporting that needs to go against the supporting club on a global grant.
Okay, what I've addressed here is just the district grants. So for a supporting club grant of a global grant, that will be rolled into the reporting required for the entire grant that the lead club and the international or the host club will be working on. So the district doesn't ask for for reports for DDF grants.
From the supporting clubs.
From the supporting clubs, yeah.
Okay.
When it's a pooled grant, the lead club and the supporting clubs will submit the applications. The final report, the onus is upon the lead club to prepare the final report. And then a copy of that is sent to the supporting clubs, who will upload it to the website. But all the receipts and supplemental documents, those will be filed by the lead club.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Gail. If there are no other questions on the report monitoring, I can move ahead now to the very final section of our presentation today, which is just a little bit on the District 5360 grants website. And just a bit of a qualification here. So oftentimes people ask, well, where do I go first? And the answer I always give is that the Rotary 5360.org website really is a great source of information for all things grant related in the district. We basically have a documentation section that is fully accessible to anybody in the club. You don't even require a password or login to view the documentation and download it. But beyond that, district grant applications must be submitted to this site, whereas the global grant applications are started on the Rotary grants website, where you get your global grant number, which you will ultimately need when you're applying for a DDF through our site as well. So a few general comments about the website. First of all, is this website has got a lot of miles on it by now. It's quite old. So some of the things that people expect in a more modern website, we don't necessarily find here. These typically are questions around login. So our website is not integrated with Club Runner in an automated sense. So that means logging into the District Grants website is a unique login and password. Your Club Runner login and password doesn't necessarily work. So that's probably the most common question that I get is what's my password on the website? The user list is periodically synchronized with the Club Runner, with the district instance. So you should expect that your login is available to you on the website, so you're known as a quantity. However, sometimes newer club members have joined Rotary since the last sync. So if you have trouble logging in, either you can't find your login ID or you don't know your password, by all means, give me a call and we can get that straightened away for you quite quickly. If you forget your password, you can also contact me and I can set you up with a new password. Again, it won't necessarily be the same one as the Club Runner password, but we can get you up and running. If I send you a password and you can then go in and reset it yourself to something that is easier to remember. So that's really all I'll say for now about the District Grants website. If you've got any questions, if you need a tour of it or anything of that nature, by all means reach out to me and I'll be more than happy to walk you through it. And I'll just wait 1 second here to see if there are any questions on the website before proceeding on to our closing comments. And it doesn't look like there are any. So I just want to thank everybody for joining us all here today. The key takeaway messages we had were, if you remember from Martin's opening comments, please pay attention to all of the deadlines. They're very important. The main one for the district grants is May the 1st. That is the deadline for submitting district project, youth program scholarship applications on our website. Anything that's submitted beyond that date typically does not get considered. And you may find that you run into issues. For example, you haven't completed your MOU. That is also due on May the 1st. So a lot of things happen around that date. Please don't leave it to the last minute, because we usually have more time to address people's concerns in the run up to the 1st of May rather than right at the deadline. But just remember, we have to have the MOUs executed and on file before you can actually complete your grant application. And the grant application does get cut off at noon on the 1st of May. Second point is that you cannot make commitments to your various projects before the grant is approved. Anything that was committed to before that date will be disallowed. Third thing is that clubs must satisfy all the reporting requirements, and no payments can be made on new grants or current year grants while any of the requirements from past grants are outstanding. So for the 2021 year, the year we're currently in, the district has received a full block grant, but we've been unable to disperse all of the funds to all of the clubs at this point because some clubs still have outstanding requirements for reporting or payback. And we certainly want to liberate those funds for you as quickly as possible. Final point for me is that if the rules are not followed, grants have to be returned. We will go after them, and the district will go after us. So it's exceedingly important that all requirements are met, so you're not in a position where you're being asked to return Rotary Foundation funds to us. So that's it for the grant session for this year. I will just conclude by pointing to an email address that's available again on the website. This is the general support mailbox for all things grants related. If you send an email to D5360 Grants Help Desk, it's a Gmail account, on any topic, we'll receive that and we'll route your question to the appropriate team. If it has to do with the website, typically it comes to myself. Otherwise, it'll come to one of the team leads like Leslie for the global grants or somebody on the district project grants team. But that's it for me. Thank you all very much for attending, and good luck with filing your grant applications for the 2022-2023 Rotary year.